This video is sponsored by AG1. Back before propellers were invented, paddle wheels were used to propel boats. They never really got adopted for use on high-speed vessels because they're cumbersome and relatively inefficient above speeds of around 4 knots or so. Despite this, I found that if you get them spinning fast enough, they can actually do a pretty good job at planing across the surface of the water. It's the same effect that allows super fast RC cars to drive on water. In this video, I'm going to try adapting high-speed paddle wheels for use on ground effect vehicles. Ground effect vehicles are a kind of boat-airplane hybrid that are designed to fly low to the surface of the water. Flying low can increase an aircraft's efficiency, and it's also just a fun engineering problem to fiddle around with. One of the cool things about the ground effect is that it's a self-stabilizing feedback loop. This means that the aircraft has a natural tendency to stay right in the sweet spot. Not too high, not too low. It'll just float right above the surface on a high-pressure cushion of air without hardly any input from the pilot. The unfortunate thing for me is that the ground effect is less effective with these smaller scale aircraft than it is with full scale aircraft. That means it's more difficult to keep these RC-sized models in the ground effect sweet spot. There's less of a self-stabilizing feedback loop to hold them there. One of the big challenges is that every time the aircraft accidentally comes in contact with the water, it loses a lot of kinetic energy. I think people have a hard time comprehending just how viscous water is compared to air, especially at high speeds. Even just the very bottom of the pontoon momentarily glancing off the water can really slow down the aircraft. This disrupts the ground effect's self-stabilizing feedback loop and can easily bog down the aircraft if the pilot isn't fast enough to respond. To solve this problem, what if I could make it so that the aircraft actually accelerates when it touches the water, instead of just decelerates? In steps the high-speed paddle wheel. I actually first had this idea way back when I built this tandem wing par thrust ground effect hovercraft kind of thing that never really ended up working very well. The first thing I did was design this paddle wheel pontoon thing to experiment with. What that taught me was that this type of design would just act like an impeller, sucking air in through the sides and blowing it out through the outer diameter. This air would just blow the water out of the way and prevent the wheel from really ever digging into the water. That led me to a paddle design with sidewalls to hopefully prevent the centrifugal impeller effect. I installed 2 of these on the tandem wing aircraft, along with an EDF for a little extra thrust.
I'd give it like a 3% chance of working. The glue is still drying, so that's why there's tape on there.
Nice.
Oh, sick! Look at that!
Ah, wow, that's sweet. Wow. Oh. That's so sweet.
It works. I just can't control it. Wow.
That's sweet. Get him. Get him.
I could feel it kicking up goose poop. Oh, look at the goose poop spray. Oh, nasty. I could feel it hit my legs when I threw it down.
So this thing worked better than I ever expected it to. After that, I started to build these new paddle wheels that are powered by 2 brushless motors each, one on each side. I'd CNC cut some carbon fiber plates to bolt onto the motors and glue onto the airframe. After that, I let them sit on the table for 2 years. And finally, just a few months ago, I got around to building some Depron pontoons around them, and connecting the 2 pontoons together to form some sort of a ram effect pond skimmer type thing. Not really sure what to call this thing, but it ended up being pretty cool. At first I tried starting it out on water, and it kind of struggled to get up and go, although it did work once or twice. After that, I tried it out on this puddle, and that's when it really started to show some signs of life. At any given time, I have numerous of these kinds of projects going on at once, and it takes a lot of physical and mental energy to finish them all, especially with the bi-weekly posting schedule I've been on.
To keep my pace up, I don't rely on coffee or energy drinks. All I do is make sure my body is well nourished, and I've found the easiest way to do that is with AG1.
AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole foods source ingredients that support my brain, gut, and immune system. It combines what you would normally get from a cabinet full of individual supplements into a single, simple drink mix.
For me, it's hands down the best way to improve my long-term health while keeping my daily performance at its peak. One of the cool things about AG1 is it's not a static product. Since 2010, they've updated their formula 52 times. Science is always learning new ways to improve our health, and whenever a beneficial new ingredient is discovered, they add it to the mix.
Not only does AG1 include the typical vitamins and minerals you would expect in a daily multivitamin, but it also includes stress adaptogens, pre- and probiotics, antioxidants, superfoods, mushrooms, and digestive support ingredients. Recently, my dad tried some of my AG1 and liked it so much that he asked for it for Christmas. There you go, Dad, and big thanks to AG1 for taking care of my dad's Christmas present for me. They also have these super convenient travel packs that make me feel the best even when I'm away from home.
I'm really grateful that AG1 is supporting this channel because it's a product that I can truly stand behind. Their drink mix along with the vitamin D3 plus K2 drops undoubtedly improve the way I feel, and I bet they could work for you too.
If you're interested, click on the link in the description or go to drinkag1.com/rctestflight for a 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 AG1 travel packs free with your first purchase. Now back to the video. So, the paddles and the little air propeller I had on there together were accelerating the vehicle fast enough to make it start to fly, which was not really a good thing because this is not an aerodynamically stable vehicle. So then I turned down the max PWM of the air motor so that the power was biased more towards the paddle wheels, and that seemed to help a lot. This vehicle really doesn't have much use except for skimming across puddles, but it did serve as another good proof of concept that the high-speed paddle wheels do have some potential. In this slow motion footage, you can see that they do slap little bursts of water backwards as the paddle touches down. That's how they make thrust. It also worked decently well on short grass. The next day I took it to a bigger and flatter field. My plan this day was to incrementally cut foam off of the nose until eventually the center of pressure got moved far enough back for it to stop flipping up and trying to fly. I was definitely successful in preventing that, but then it just kind of felt a lot heavier and less efficient. Kind of like it was plowing into the ground harder. The extra ram effect lift that it had before was definitely a good thing. The next day I put a rudder on it to hopefully make it more controllable, but unfortunately I couldn't get it up on plane. Or up on paddle in this case. The ram effect lift that it used to have in the front must have been crucial. Then I drove it across some leaves, which was cool, but the paddles self-destructed, so that was the end of that. Next I hopped into Onshape to design some paddles that aren't 2 years old. Onshape is a cloud-based CAD program that's free for hobbyists. The best thing is that it makes sharing files super easy, so if you'd like to access any of the designs in this video, they're available at the link in the description. This time around, I'm printing them out of Gray Pro resin on the Form 3 Plus. Then I let it bake, screwed them onto some 5010 brushless outrunners, and attached those to the deep chord Bixel configuration ground effect vehicle from the surfboard chase video last summer. Then it was off to the lake with the Boston Whaler and one of my old vibration isolators. The isolator was to hold the world's first FreeFly Movi Carbon with the Ember high-speed camera inside. This will allow us to shoot 5K 600 frame per second high-speed video from a 5-axis stabilized gimbal with a 120mm lens. Pretty sweet. Okay, back to the science. The first thing I tried was starting off from a standstill, just floating there. But that didn't work out because the little air motors in the front were not powerful enough to lift the nose with the heavy paddle wheel motors on there. And the paddle wheels really didn't generate any forward thrust when they weren't already moving quickly over the surface of the water, because the paddles would just cavitate or ventilate or whatever. So for that reason, I had to hand launch it off the side of the boat once we were already moving. So the first thing I noticed after watching the high-speed video is that the paddle wheels seemed to be doing a good job not only at generating forward thrust, but also keeping the vehicle up off its floats. So they're not just paddle wheels, they're also planing wheels. That's good because it means that even though this vehicle is riding on the surface of the water, it doesn't have any drag from the water slowing it down. You can also see that the paddles are throwing water backwards at quite a high velocity. That's where the forward thrust is coming from. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. You can also see that water is getting thrown up into the sides a little bit, which isn't great. It would be best to find a way to minimize that. So here I didn't realize it, but I had the max throttle artificially capped in ArduPilot. So it was not at full power, even though I had the throttle stick all the way up. That's why the wheels were pretty much always in contact with the water here. It was more so just driving on the surface of the water than actually flying. Here I removed the throttle cap and now we're cooking. When this thing is flying well, you have to ask yourself if the wheels are even worth having. On this day the water was flat and the wind was calm, so it was pretty easy to stay in the ground effect sweet spot. But in choppier water or more turbulent wind, I think the wheels would actually become a lot more practical. Ah yeah, there's some waves. Good to have wheels for times like these. Or when you're just flying along perfectly but then happen to glance off the water momentarily. One issue with this thing in its current form is that it kicks up a lot of water, and a good amount of that water ends up getting stuck to the foam or on top of the wing. This probably adds quite a bit of weight. Maybe some fenders would help with that. So on this day we filmed a bunch of other cool stuff with the Movi Carbon Ember, and I'll throw that footage in at the end of this video. Okay, next experiment. This is the FMS Ranger. It's a great trainer airplane and it flies super well, but what it doesn't do super well is be a ground effect vehicle. I can't feel the ground effect at all with this thing. Despite this, I still thought it might be fun to slap a paddle wheel on there and see what happens. Okay, this would have had a much better chance of actually working if my landing wasn't terrible, but I'm pretty sure it still wouldn't have worked even if the landing was perfect. Miraculously, I was still able to drive the plane back to shore upside down. I think the paddle wheel might have been mounted a bit too deep, because the only thing it was good for was pushing the plane backwards. Okay, now back to this plane. I added fenders and gave the air motors a bit more power so that it would hopefully be able to take off from the water on its own. And it worked. It also had impressive maneuverability while floating. These paddles are better than bow thrusters. So this thing works pretty well and all, but I'll be the first to admit the paddle wheels are probably not all that necessary on this vehicle. In the future, I'd like to apply this concept to a ground effect vehicle that really needs them, and then try some sort of a long-distance waypoint mission or something like that. I've already started experimenting with different paddle shapes and other surface drive methods altogether. It might turn out that the high-speed paddle wheel isn't the best option. In one of my previous videos, I took this RC speedboat and glued some wings onto it with some air propellers in the front for a little extra ram lift. To my surprise, it actually ended up working really well. It would just kind of ride a wheelie on its surface-piercing water propeller, while the entire front end was flying through the air. So maybe I'll have to revisit that idea and try out surface-piercing propellers again. That's pretty much it for this video. I'll leave you with some more awesome high-speed Moby Carbon footage. Thanks for watching. Bye.
They spook so easily.